Hey, what's up? I was just looking in the peephole. Did it get weird? It feels like it got weird. So my nose just loves to itch on camera. I don't know why. It just does. So this is Tutankhamun, the boy Pharaoh documentary. That's what he liked to be called. Everyone walked around him and they were like, it's the boy Pharaoh. And he would go, grr, grr. I don't know how he spoke. All right, I'm just making it up. So this is, what was I saying? It's part 2. That's what I was saying. Okay. So, there's a thanks button. Wow. Am I dying? There's a thanks button on the channel. You can donate. You don't have to. All donations are appreciated. There's a subscribe button. I've got a lot of things going on in my head right now. Family stuff. Kind of annoying. And subscribe button. There's a bell. If you don't want to do any of that, you can click the thumbs up because that's the bare minimum, and that helps me. Sorry, my toe. Okay. I had to pause it. It was at 14:48. You know what? We'll go back 5 seconds. 14:48 was the end of the first video, and we're going to go ahead and restart it now.
Moses I at the beginning of the 15th century BC, until Akhenaten's move to Amarna. Tutankhamun ordered a new tomb to be created in the Valley of the Kings, in which he placed the body of his father Akhenaten in a coffin, originally intended for Queen Kia. The body of Tutankhamun's grandmother, Queen Tia, was buried in the tomb of her husband, King Amenhotep III. As part of his duties as high priest, Tutankhamun traveled across the country to attend religious festivals. As he lacked familiarity with the complex old rituals, he relied on assistance from his chief advisor, I. Every year, Tutankhamun would celebrate the Opet festival in Thebes. The ceremony began at the Temple of Karnak, where the king stood before 3 model boats carrying statues of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, the 3 gods known collectively as the Theban Triad. After making offerings, the king led a procession to the Nile, followed by the priests carrying the boats on their shoulders. The king, queen, and effigies of the 3 gods would then travel up the river to another temple, while soldiers and courtiers marched along the riverbanks to the sound of religious hymns, sung by priests and accompanied by royal musicians. Once inside the main temple of Thebes, Tutankhamun and his priests would proceed into the inner sanctum to reenact the coronation ceremony and renew the king's divine power. While construction of the Luxor temple had begun during the reign of his grandfather, Amenhotep III, Tutankhamun carried on building work in the temple and had the colonnade hall decorated with images of him and Ankhesenamun taking part in the Opet festival. In addition to restoring the images and monuments of the old gods throughout the country, Tutankhamun initiated building projects of his own. Aside from the colonnade hall in the Temple of Luxor, he ordered the construction of a Sphinx Avenue at Karnak. Near the pyramids of Giza, Tutankhamun built a small palace for himself, which served as a hunting lodge. In his day-to-day activities, the king was assisted by his palace administration, headed by the High Steward of Memphis, Epi, who had formerly managed Akhenaten's palace at Amarna. After Epi's death, his office was assumed by Inuia, who had previously worked as a scribe for Maya at the treasury. As in modern royal households, a team of servants was responsible for the royal crowns and the king's vast wardrobe, which included outfits for every possible occasion. Tutankhamun's kingdom extended beyond the modern-day borders of Egypt.
I apologize, but I'm just laughing at that somebody who takes care of the royal crown, but it's to have an outfit for every occasion. I have 2 pairs of jeans, and one of them I accidentally wore to work one day, so now I actually have one pair of jeans and I have to go get more. And my work jeans, I had 4, 5. Now I got 6. 2 of them have holes in the knees, so I duct tape the inside because they're just, I mean, you're crawling around on all kinds of floors and concrete, and they get destroyed pretty good. But I just think I have one pair of shoes that I go out in. I have, what is going on over there? I have maybe 8 to 10 shirts. Now, like, I got this is a junk shirt. I got tons of junk shirts. But I got about 8 to 10 shirts that you'll probably see me in. And that's about it. Underoos and socks I'm good on. But I can't imagine having an outfit for every occasion, because that would also be for weather. I wear jeans in the summer, not necessarily because I want to, but because I just don't really have something that would be deemed as shorts that I would want to wear, like in public. It's fascinating.
Egypt. To the south, Egypt ruled Nubia in what is now Sudan. To the northeast, the Egyptian pharaohs vassalized the rulers of the Levant. The eastern Mediterranean region, including Israel, Lebanon, Palestine, and Syria. Many of these conquests were carried out by Thutmose III, the stepson of Hatshepsut, who ruled a century before Tutankhamun and was one of the greatest military commanders in ancient Egyptian history. Accordingly, Tutankhamun held audiences with his...
Sorry, I'm going to go back. What was that guy's name? I apologize. Or woman. We are... it was a man. Sorry. What was his name?
Who ruled a century before Tutankhamun.
Yeah, of course I... Thutmose III, Egyptian pharaoh. What does anyone know about him? Would it be interesting to find a video on him? Because there's a part of me that really is curious how pharaohs fought. How pharaohs fought. What did I say? I swear I said how pharaohs fart. I wouldn't care how they farted. I wouldn't want to have a video where I'm just listening to pharaohs walking around farting. Yes, and then he went, and the other one went, and he won. Like, that's not what I meant. So stupid.
Third, the stepson of Hatshepsut, who ruled a century before Tutankhamun and was one of the greatest military commanders in ancient Egyptian history. Accordingly, Tutankhamun held audiences with his vassals and with foreign rulers, during which he would receive expensive gifts. Many of these gifts...
He is still 10 years old, right? This is a 10-year-old boy who's meeting with heads of state. The 10-year-old
would have been given to the temple as offerings to the gods, but the king would keep some for himself, which were later found in his tomb. General Horemheb played a vital role in these meetings, transmitting messages between the king and his foreign visitors via an interpreter. As commander-in-chief of Tutankhamun's armies, Horemheb was also responsible for putting down a Nubian uprising in the 1320s BC. While Horemheb campaigned both in Nubia and in the Levant, it is unclear if the king himself was present at the battles. Although there are depictions of Tutankhamun firing arrows from his chariot, these were most likely idealized images, as the king's youth and disability would have hampered his ability to play an active part in battles.
I would say that's probably him. If they're going to make a image or picture or whatever, that's probably him just, hey. Or somebody who inserted him in there to make him seem, there was kind of like a nice gesture because maybe you worship him or whatever. So it's just kind of like a nice gesture. They'll put that in there, and I'm sure he looked at it and was like, yeah, that looked like me. I'm pretty sure I did that. I'm also 10. I'm a 10-year-old boy. For the love of Pete.
The Nubian territories were administered by a government official with the title of Viceroy of Kush. Tutankhamun appointed as his viceroy a man named Hui, who happened to be married to the chief of the royal harem. Hui supervised the collection of tribute for the king from the Nubians, including vast quantities of gold, ebony, ivory tusks, and other artistic objects. A few years into Tutankhamun's reign, Hui returned to the king's court with the tribute, accompanied by a procession of Nubian princes and prisoners of war, perhaps captured during Horemheb's campaign. After a decade of hardship, the attendees at the ceremony welcomed this sign of a return to prosperity. The old gods had been returned to their rightful places. Memories of the Atenist heresy were gradually fading away, and the abandoned city of Amarna had been systematically dismantled, and the remaining traces of it were being covered by the desert sands. The teenage Tutankhamun seemed secure on his throne and could be expected to exercise power in his own right within a few years. Perhaps a new golden age was imminent after the heresy of the reign of Akhenaten. During Akhenaten's reign, the Egyptians lost control of the Levantine city of Kadesh on the border of Syria and Lebanon, a major trade hub at the time. The Hittites of eastern Turkey were expanding their empire into the Levant and captured Kadesh, replacing the Egyptian vassal Shutatara with his son Atekama, who supported the Hittites while publicly maintaining his allegiance to Egypt. Though Akhenaten had sent a military expedition to Kadesh, it failed to retake the city from the Hittites. Late in Tutankhamun's reign, the king sent Horemheb with an army aiming to retake Kadesh and reverse the humiliation suffered during his father's reign. Horemheb's campaign was commemorated in war scenes commissioned by Tutankhamun, but there is no further detail on how the campaign transpired. The city of Kadesh stood in the middle of a meander of the river Orontes, with trees all around, terrain that was unfamiliar to the Egyptians. Although the depictions of the campaign show Horemheb returning to Egypt with Atekama as a prisoner of war, along with Egyptian soldiers successfully storming a fortress, the Egyptians failed to recapture Kadesh, which remained in Hittite hands until the Egyptian king Seti I briefly reconquered the city in the early 13th century BC.
I've heard of Seti. Have I heard of Seti? Or I might be mixing him up with somebody else. Well, not somebody else. Something else. Is Seti? No. Never mind. That's a stupid thing. I'm stupid, so I'm gonna ask anyways. Was Seti that thing in South America, that giant dish that was picking up signals from space? Was that named Seti? Is that why I'm thinking that? Am I an idiot? If I am, you don't have to comment on that. If I am correct and I'm a genius, comment on that. That'll make my day.
Even without achieving the primary aim of taking Kadesh, the Egyptian depictions of the campaign, which could be pure propaganda, show the Egyptian commander parading Hittite prisoners in front of Tutankhamun. The king duly provided Horemheb with rich rewards, before going to the temple of Karnak to deposit a share of the spoils of war for the gods. Some of the prisoners captured by Horemheb may have been executed as a sacrifice to the gods. While Horemheb was away on campaign, Tutankhamun presided over the celebrations of the New Year festival. On the first day of the new year, Tutankhamun sat on his royal throne as gifts from the royal workshops and foreign dignitaries were laid down in front of his feet. These gifts would be meticulously recorded by scribes, and the king would distribute a selection of them to his courtiers. In the evening, Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun invited their courtiers to a banquet. The guests ate bread along with duck, ox meat, and goose, while the king was given food that had been purified at the temple fit for a god. The New Year celebration was accompanied by large quantities of beer and wine from the royal vineyards. The king and his courtiers may have ended the day's celebration by playing one of the board games that was found in his tomb early in the 20th century. A popular game was Senet, played on a board with 30 squares and at least 10 counters. While the rules of the game have been lost and may have evolved over the centuries, the game is likely a variation of the royal game of the oldest board game in existence, dating to around 3000 BC, where players threw dice or knuckle bones and raced their counters to the end of the board. Two of the game sets found in Tutankhamun's tomb were designed for travel and contained small drawers to hold the counters, and the king...
Would it be weird if I was hoping that they found him with an unopened Monopoly game? Would that be weird? It'd be weird. But he would have been ahead of his time.
And queen may have kept themselves entertained with this during their travels across the country. Around the time of the New Year festivities, the Apis bull in Memphis had died. The bull was worshipped as an incarnation of the god Ptah, a creator god whose worship was centered in Memphis. After the death of each bull, the city priests would search for the next incarnation with the same characteristics: a black bull with a white diamond on the top of its head, and an eagle pattern on its back. Before the priests could begin their search, Tutankhamun presided over the burial ceremony for the bull at the Serapeum, the burial site for the sacred bulls in the ancient royal necropolis of Saqqara, which may have been founded by Tutankhamun's grandfather Amenhotep III. The king would have hoped that these rituals would bring his armies glory in the Levant. As he shouldered more of the burdens of government in his late teens, Tutankhamun enjoyed the opportunity to relax by going hunting. While the most common hunting weapon was the bow and arrow, the king also hunted birds from a boat using a curved throw stick, much like a boomerang. For close combat, he had his choice of clubs, maces, or swords. The young king enjoyed hunting while riding in a chariot, firing arrows from his bow while a charioteer steered the horses. Among the items found in Tutankhamun's tomb is a wooden chest illustrated with hunting scenes, depicting the king in his chariot with his bow drawn, targeting the mass of fleeing animals about to fall prey to his arrows. Yet this taste for hunting would prove fatal. During the 9th year of his reign, Tutankhamun was out hunting when he fell from his chariot. As the king fell to the ground, he broke his left leg and lay bleeding. His servants carried him back to his palace and onto his bed. With Ankhesenamun at his side, the injured king was attended by the royal doctors and the priests of Sekhmet. As the doctors examined the wound, they realized that little could be done to save the king. Nevertheless, they did all they could in the circumstances and wrapped the king's leg in linen soaked in oil and honey to hold the leg in place and stop the bleeding. Despite their best efforts, the king's leg became infected, and within a matter of days, the 19-year-old King Tutankhamun was dead after just 9 years on the throne.
That was how he died? I was always under the assumption he came... Well, yeah. I was under the assumption he came down ill. Which would make sense if the leg was infected, then yeah, he probably did. Oh, poor guy. What a terrible way to go. Wow. Sorry, I guess I never knew that was how we look back on things like this and we're like, so easy. I mean, look, me personally, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd scream and probably shat my pants because I'd be like, ah. But like modern medicine, you're fine. We are so lucky to be alive today with the advancement of technology and stuff like that. And I understand it's not everywhere around the world, but and it should be. But when you see something like this, it's just so fixable, if that's the word. I'm sorry. I'm going to get back to the video. Wow.
There would be no long and prosperous reign, and the Egyptian kingdom was in turmoil once again. With the death of her husband, Ankhesenamun appears to have been the remaining survivor from amongst Akhenaten's children, and ruled as regent in the absence of an obvious successor. While it would have been possible for her to follow in her mother's footsteps and rule in her own right, the court decided she should marry a man who would become pharaoh. The pharaohs of the 18th dynasty were accustomed to marrying their own family members, but there were no close relatives left. As Ankhesenamun insisted on marrying a man of royal status, she took the surprising decision of sending a message to the Hittite king, Suppiluliuma I, explaining the situation in Egypt and asking if he could offer a solution in the form of a son, who would marry her and become pharaoh in place of her late husband. When Suppiluliuma received the letter 2 weeks later, he could hardly believe what he was being offered. He had been fighting the Egyptians in the Levant for decades, and now he had an opportunity to incorporate Egypt into his empire in an instant. Nevertheless, he remained cautious and decided to send an envoy to Egypt to find out if the offer was genuine, or if Tutankhamun was alive and well, and the whole scheme had been an elaborate Egyptian ruse to cripple Hittite power. Ankhesenamun was not pleased to learn that the Hittite king had not immediately accepted her offer, as she was in something of a race against time. Traditionally, a pharaoh would be buried 70 days after dying, but the late king could not be buried without a successor in place. Without carrying out the necessary rituals for his burial, Tutankhamun's passage to his eternal afterlife would be blocked.
Okay, the 70 days thing, because they're mummifying him and stuff like that, correct? I'm going to go back because I don't know if they explain it, but you can't be buried unless you have a successor. He's dead. He can't name a successor, so why hold up the funeral part? I heard something about he can't get into the afterlife, so I'm sure that's going to explain it. I'll unpause it if I have more questions. How about that?
Without a successor in place. Without carrying out the necessary rituals for his burial, Tutankhamun's passage to his eternal afterlife would be blocked. With winter approaching, there was no chance that Ankhesenamun would get an answer from the Hittite king within 70 days. Never.
So without the successor, they can't do the ritual. And I'm guessing... Did something just pop up? A little thing over here? Am I crazy? Am I taking crazy pills? So, the ritual can't be done. So does the ritual have to include the successor? The successor would take part in the ritual, I'm going to guess. Did I miss that on the first one? I probably did because I'm stupid. So, he can't be in the ritual, and if you don't give the ritual, then there's no afterlife. Am I on the right page?
Nevertheless, the royal artisans hurried to prepare the items for Tutankhamun's tomb that would help his journey into the afterlife. Egyptian kings typically had their grave goods made far in advance, but Tutankhamun had reigned for only 9 years and died unexpectedly when still very young. While for most of his reign, artists and sculptors had been busy restoring the temples of the old gods rather than producing his funerary goods. No matter how fast they worked.
But to be fair, he's 10 years old when he takes over. He's 19. You aren't looking at making funeral, items to be buried with him. You think you have a ton of... Now, I don't know what the average lifespan was back then, but let's say it was 35, 40. It's not good for me. But let's say it was... even if it was 30, he's 19. You still look at it like, well, we've still got plenty of time. You're not actually expecting that's going to happen, especially from a fall. I'm going to end the video at the 29, a little over 29 minutes, but I apologize for pausing.
The royal artisans could not be expected to make an entire assemblage of grave goods for Tutankhamun within a mere 70 days, but they could repurpose those prepared for Neferuaten, which for some reason or other remained unused. The most spectacular object among these items was a golden death mask, which the late king's goldsmiths changed to bear his likeness while replacing the name Neferuaten with Tutankhamun. In addition to the items intended for Neferuaten, the artisans selected hundreds, if not thousands, of items either owned by the late king or kept in the palace storerooms. Also intended for burial in Tutankhamun's tomb were the mummified remains of his 2 stillborn daughters in tiny coffins.
Wow. I'm going to end it there. I didn't realize I was under the impression that he never had, well, he didn't, so to speak, but I was under the impression he never had children. So there's a part of me that always thought I didn't realize he got to be 19. I thought he died younger. I thought it was like 15 or 16. But that's why I'm watching the videos, because I apparently don't know. 2 stillborn kids. That's terrible. But then again, you're talking about life back then. Wow. Man, I cannot believe you fall out of a chariot, you break your leg, and that's it. We're lucky. We're lucky we're in a time where it might require emergency surgery, but, you know, chances are really good you're going to live. So, okay, well, I'm going to end this here. This is part 2. We will be back for part 3. And the chariot is that's mind-blowing. So, sorry. Until next time, have a good day, have a good night.